Good evening and welcome to the March 24, 2025 work session of the Mayor and City Council. Tonight we have two discussion topics, and before we get to those, we have a couple announcements. First is that we will not have a work session next Monday, March 31st. The next regular session of the Mayor and Council will be on Monday, April 7th, 7:30 p.m. And you can participate in the room with us or on Zoom, or just watch our streams on YouTube or on the cable channel. And we also have a formal announcement. I'm going to leave that to Councilmember Harris.
So notice to the general public is hereby given that the City of Gaithersburg will hold 3 public meetings to invite comments on the use of Community Development Block Grants, or CDBGs, Community Block Grant funding available to the city through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The city is preparing its fiscal year 25 action plan for the period of July 2025 through June 2026. At these meetings, staff will introduce the CDBG program, describe how funds must benefit low to moderate income households, and describe how proposed activities to benefit these residents and communities. 3 meeting dates are Friday, April 4, 2025 from noon to 1 p.m., Monday, April 28, 2025 from 6 to 7 p.m., and Tuesday, April 29, 2025 also from noon to 1 p.m. The meetings will be held virtually via the Zoom webinar platform. To register to participate and provide public input, please visit the public meetings page on the city's website, www.gaithersburgmd.gov/meetings. A Spanish-speaking interpreter will be available. Pursuant to the provisions of the Americans with Disabilities Act, any person requiring reasonable accommodation related to a disability is asked to advise the city at least 48 hours in advance. Contact the Human Resources Department at hr@gaithersburgmd.gov or 301-258-6327. For further information, please contact Maureen Walker, Housing and Community Development Program Coordinator, at maureen.walker@gaithersburgmd.gov or telephone 240-805-1067.
Thank you, Neil. I will note that our council member colleague Jim McNulty is participating virtually, so we'll call on him when the time comes. And I will also note, actually 2 more notes. Today is the birthday of former Mayor Sidney A. Katz, and he's not watching, so he has no idea I'm wishing him happy birthday, but we do wish him a happy birthday. And for members of the public who may be tuning in or here, although it's kind of sparsely attended tonight, what we're going to do is we'll go through our both discussion topics, and then I'll call for any public comment after we've done both topics. So with that, we are going to go into our first topic, which is this is more than mid-session, sort of close to end of session legislative update. And we have our lobbying team of Teresa Hessler and Sarah Peters, and we have Tom Lonergan-Seeger, Assistant City Manager, to lead us in that. Take it away.
I'm actually going to turn it right over to Teresa to start the update.
All right.
Great. Thank you, Tom. And good evening, Mayor Ashman and members of the council. For the record, my name is Teresa Hessler, CEO of Ashler Government Relations, and joining me today is my colleague Sarah Peters with Hush Blackwell Strategies, here to provide a mid-session report. The Maryland General Assembly is in the final weeks, as the mayor mentioned, with crossover last Monday, the 17th of March. Facing a $3.3 billion deficit, Governor Wes Moore and leadership in the House and Senate is working diligently to address budget deficits and has recently announced a budget framework that includes new revenue and spending cuts. The plan introduces a 3% tax on information technology and data services to businesses and consumers, and a new tax bracket for residents earning over $750,000 annually. Additional taxes target gambling, cannabis, vending machines, and capital gains for individuals with incomes exceeding $350,000. This framework also entails $2.3 billion in spending cuts, making the most substantial reductions in 16 years as proposed. The House will take up the budget on second reader tonight, but we are hearing the majority of the debate will be held till tomorrow's floor session. And Senate budget subcommittees met this afternoon for decision meetings. There's still a lot to unfold, and tomorrow, the full Budget and Taxation Committee will meet to vote on the budget and the BRFA. Additionally, Governor Moore has proposed scaling back certain elements of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future to help save money, which would be a $3.8 billion education reform initiative as it was introduced initially years ago. The proposed changes aim to address budgetary constraints while maintaining efforts to expand pre-kindergarten programs, tutoring, and early literacy initiatives. The adjustments focus on hiring and retaining teachers, while some proposals facing opposition from education advocates and lawmakers. A lot is still up in the air with the budget, and our team will continue to keep the city updated over the next 2 weeks. Regarding FAMLA, family leave, on Friday, March 21st, the House Economic Matters Committee amended House Bill 102, the Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program, titled Application Year and Participation of Self-Employed Individuals, which they amended to delay the implementation of the program. The program was initially slated to launch with contributions in July of 2025 and July 2026. And if this passes as amended, the delay would be an 18-month delay. Regulations would be pushed back to be adopted in July of 2027, and the bill was intended to add an optional self-employment enrollment option under the family program. The governor's supplemental budget also addresses this program and considers funding for the implementation. Additionally, while the AGR team did monitor and weigh in on numerous pieces of legislation for the city, we wanted to brief the council on several key bills, including House Bill 503 and Senate Bill 430, titled Land Use, Regional Housing and Infrastructure Gap, which is also known as the Housing for Jobs Act. This was an initiative of the executive branch and includes key provisions such as addressing regional housing infrastructure gaps, and defines a regional gap as the number of housing units required for a region's jobs to housing ratio to fall under 1.5. It would also establish regional destinations such as the Baltimore, Washington suburban and Southern Maryland regions. It changes calculations and apportions regarding the Department of Housing and Community Development and Department of Planning and calculations. It changes local obligations, mandates of local jurisdictions to take active measures to reduce housing gaps, and requires jurisdictions to approve housing development applications. Additionally, the AGR team has been working with both the Maryland Municipal League to keep updated regarding any amendments that they're working on. Neither the Senate nor the House bill has moved out of committee, but we're still keeping our ear close to the ground on that legislation, and we'll let everyone know as the next 2 weeks unfold. The next bills that we wanted to note on was Senate Bill 198 and House Bill 20. This is Transportation, Consolidated Transportation Program Prioritization, also known as the Transportation Investment Priorities Act of 2025. As drafted, major alterations include requiring the department to evaluate projects based on new project-based scoring systems, using objectives and quantifiable measures to reach goals and consider benefits related to state cost, to identify funding available for certain purposes, encouraging capacity enhancing projects to improve ability of the system to move people and goods, and solicits requests from transportation project entities. As far as the status of this bill is concerned, neither the House nor the Senate has moved out of the committee. A pilot was carried out by MDOT to see how the projects would score, but currently the threshold is too high for the city of Gaithersburg under the threshold. The next bill is Senate Bill 324, which is cross-filed with House Bill 997, Admissions and Amusement Tax, Food and Beverages. This bill has been introduced prior and authorizes the county to impose a tax on gross receipts derived from sale of food or beverages from different vendors. The tax rate may not exceed 3%. If there is no tax rate previously set by a county, it may not be set so that when it is combined with sales and use tax, the total tax will not exceed 11% on gross receipts. Currently, state law is that tax rates may not exceed 8 or 10% of gross receipts. The AGR team did submit written support on behalf of the city of Gaithersburg and has worked closely with the Maryland Municipal League regarding any updates. As of today, neither bill has moved out of committee. The next bill we'd like to touch on is House Bill 1103, and that is cross-filed with Senate Bill 979, Local Government Accommodations, Hotel Rental Tax Collection by a Comptroller. This was the first year this bill was introduced, and it would require that accommodations by intermediaries are collecting hotel rental tax to the comptroller rather than to the county if the intermediary facilitates booking transactions or sales totaling $100,000 or more in a year, or 200 or more booking transactions in a year. So this defines accommodations as apartments, cottages, hostels, inns, motels, roomings, house, tourists, the online sites that you see listed. Additionally, a county must not impose a higher tax rate on a short-term rental and must notify the comptroller 60 days prior to modifying a hotel rental tax rate. There's been a lot of questions regarding this very complex legislation. Neither the Senate nor the House bill has moved out of committee, and I think a lot of questions still need answered before coming up with a final product on this legislation. And lastly, the city of Gaithersburg was in strong support of House Bill 1257, landlord and tenant residential leases. This bill would mandate additional transparency between landlords and tenants. It passed out of the House and has a hearing this Wednesday in the Senate. Regarding bond initiatives and funding, the AGR team is working to secure funding for the new city hall by way of legislative bond initiative. While confirmation of the LBI funding will not be finalized until the passage of the final capital state budget, the AGR team will continue to work closely with our House Appropriations members and our Senate Budget and Tax members, as well as our district representatives in Annapolis. And with that, we are happy to answer any questions regarding the legislation or elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate all the work you guys do. I'll start with the last thing, the legislative bond initiative. I was in Annapolis a couple weeks ago for Maryland Mayors Association and talked to some people involved in that who were optimistic that we were going to get something. They had a number. I don't want to say the number publicly, but that we were going to get something, which makes me happy, and is particularly in this very difficult budget season. I think anything would be great, but the more the better. I don't want to say, if you're watching, people, I don't. We're not going to settle for like a tiny little bit. Like, all right. Let me just take the foot out of my mouth here. Question: one of a longtime city Gaithersburg priority, but not specifically this year, but one that is a MML priority, the speed camera bill. Are you guys familiar with where that one stands? And again, I know there are 3 million bills. You may not have tracked that one super closely. Do you have anything on that or no?
I don't know off the top of my head, but
Okay.
I'm happy to follow up with you.
What the speed camera bill does is it allows, right now, speed cameras have to be serviced and calibrated or whatever on a daily basis by sworn, uniformed officers, and this bill would allow civilian employees to be able to do that. We've been trying for years to get this done. It seems like such a simple change, but things in Annapolis have a tendency to overcomplicate. I've spoken with Senator Nancy King about the admissions and amusement tax, and I know she went to bat for us because she was basically texting me while while I was in her committee, but she's not optimistic that that's going to move this year. So we'll see. But I think that's all I got. I wrote down in terms of the family bill and the delay. I can't speak to as a whole public policy, but I know as a city, as a municipal organization, we had some concerns with that because the sorts of coverages and benefits that it was requiring were things that we already provide, and it was going to end up costing us more for providing the same benefits we do to our employees anyway. So I'm not, from that perspective, wearing that hat, I'm not upset that it's delayed. But we'll see how that goes. Neil, we'll go to you.
So a couple of the bills, the amusement tax bill and the one for, I guess, basically short-term rentals, you basically couched it in terms of the county being able to potentially levy a fee. Would those fees be applicable to municipalities
Yes.
as well?
It says local government the way it's written.
Okay.
So it would apply to us too.
All right, that's fine. Maybe someday.
Yeah, maybe someday.
And in terms of the bills relating to transportation, I know Ryan has been championing a bill for local authorities for specific regions in the state, which is something that's been near and dear to me for quite some time. It sounds like right now the tenor of the legislation is to focus on statewide authority and having MDOT have the ability to implement these rather than local authorities. Do we have any idea if there's any movement in the direction of local authorities on being acceptable sometime in the near future?
So Sarah Peters for the record, forgive me. So the authorities bill has been introduced by Delegate Spiegel. This is the second year. Prior to that, the BMC and some other organizations had been taking it up and they've hosted community meetings. So this has been a part of the dialogue for quite some time. Though I will say the bill has not moved, but I think the dialogue and conversation has grown exponentially. And so I anticipate even if it does not pass this year, and I'll just sort of divert to say crossover is that day as in part of session that basically says if a bill doesn't pass to the second chamber by that day, it's probably unlikely to pass. There are some exceptions to the rules, leadership bills, anything backed by leadership. Sometimes what we've seen is even though a bill hasn't moved, there's commitment by both chambers to work on them and then move them simultaneously. In that way, it's exemption. Long-winded response to say no movement on the regional authorities bill, but the conversation is more robust than I've ever heard it to be.
All right, that's what I was hoping to hear at this point. And in terms of the kind of rational scorecard going forward for transportation projects, is there a way to get a look at what that scorecard entails at this point?
By the rational scorecard, are you referring to the CTP bill? Well, let me say that me and Tom here have had some conversations with your team saying, you know, we're outside of DC, we have some robust transportation and CTP needs, and yet there's so many projects that remain in the queue, and why haven't we seen them progress? And so we, prior to any bills being introduced, said to ourselves, well, we should probably be more engaged. Like, we submit a letter every year. We don't inherently get an answer to our letter every year. Like, what's next? How can we be more involved? How can our projects be in the light of those decision makers? And so we were actually going to introduce our own bill to include us in the CTP process in a way that's not the roadshow where you have historically spoken. And then when we met with MDOT, they were like, you don't need to. We have our own bill. And so we were briefed by it. The bill was introduced. It didn't garner any traction. I will say, I think their philosophy is that something that isn't budgeted wouldn't make that CTP plan. And quite frankly, we just don't have a ton of money. I know we have concerns even with that bill that the municipal representation isn't quite what we wanted it to be. And so we've had a commitment internally, me and Tom, that we want to have further conversations with MDOT.
Okay.
But the bill, I was in speaking with MDOT a few weeks ago, they don't anticipate it to.
Yeah, the scorecard is one of the things I really like about the Virginia form of transportation authorities. It makes for good decision making. So I'm hoping that we make good decisions as well. All right, thanks, Sarah.
Rob, you got anything? We're going this
I'm
side.
out of questions.
Okay, Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is my first time with a budget this tough. So is it a possibility that this budget could not make it out of General Assembly, not have the votes to make it in time? And if that's the case, then what happens?
So let me start by saying that the budget has a different timeline than sine die, which is April 7th at midnight. And forgive me, when does the budget need to pass?
31st.
The 31st. Last year, they delayed it, I want to say by 6-ish days. It was a bit after the deadline. They had to make a motion to extend it. But no, short answer is no. There was a press conference the other day. They were waiting for the federal government to act. And well, they sort of acted. It didn't shut down. And so Guy Guzzoni, the chair of the Budget and Taxation Committee in the Senate, was like, you know, we delayed it a bit, a few days, waiting for the federal government. Here we are. Then just as of a few days ago, the Speaker of the House, the Senate President, along with the chairs of both the Ways and Means Committee, the Appropriations Committee, and Budget and Taxation, with the governor and lieutenant governor, went to the State House. They all convened a press conference where they announced the budget framework. So what Teresa outlined was just that, the budget framework, sort of the bare bones, and the details still need to be worked out. For example, they mentioned this data tax, and we don't know the details around it. What next codes are going to be applicable here? There was a question by a reporter, would this apply to certain bills? And the consensus is no. But I say all that to say is more details to flesh out, but we fully anticipate a budget to pass on time.
Okay, thank you.
Jamil?
I'm hearing grumblings potentially of a fall session that may happen under, I haven't been in Maryland when that's happened. What conditions could cause that to occur, and what's your reading on that?
So I think me and Teresa joke quite a bit that like that's always in the rumor mill. I think always around crossover, it's like, didn't you hear? Like there could be a special session. Couldn't you?
Right.
I will say this is probably the only year me and Teresa sort of look at each other and we're like, but maybe, like with the unpredictable nature of the federal government, I wouldn't take it off the table. I think when any given day you hear from decision makers that are like, no, like we have discretion to cut our own budgets through the Board of Public Works. We've made enough cuts to probably be safe, but also we don't know what to expect from the federal government. So I think it's always on the table until it's not. But we don't have any definitive guidance at the moment.
All right, and I got a text from Councilmember McNulty that he did not have any particular questions. So we thank you for all your work and continued advocacy on behalf of the city of Gaithersburg. I'm assuming we don't have any staff questions, correct? Okay. Well, then I will let you guys off the hook. I know you have some drives ahead of you to get back to Annapolis, so thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and as I said to any of the public who's watching, if you have any questions on this topic, just hold off. We are going to do public comment after our next discussion topic, and if there is anything that we need to get answers from our lobbying team, we can reach them and get that. Okay, so next. Let's see who's next. We're going to have an update on the 15% design for the 12 South Summit Avenue building. And we have Melanie Brown from our Public Works Department and Jessica Swigart from Mann's Woodward Studios. And welcome.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, council members. Over the past 4 months, the city has collaborated with the Mann's Woodward Studios design team to assess the 12 South Summit Avenue building. This process included conducting building evaluations, interviewing current City Hall staff, and gathering input from other divisions that may potentially occupy the building in the future. This evening, we have prepared a presentation to guide you through the steps taken to develop the 15% design progress layout for both the building and the adjacent vacant lot. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to our project architect, Jessica Swigart.
So, hi, I'm Jessica Swigart. Nice to meet you guys. I'm going to
Welcome.
roll
Welcome.
through this. If I go too fast or get too loud, which I tend to do, let me know. All right.
We're excited too. I'll just say that.
So starting just agenda-wise, we really just want to talk about what our goals were, what we've accomplished. That includes programming, test fits, layouts, doing a site design exhibit, but also where we currently sit and what the future schedule and progress of this design is going to look like. So starting with the project goals, we absolutely wanted to make sure that we understood as a group, and that include the city and the design team, which departments and divisions, what needs to go in there, what wants to go in there, what is required, and what is just a wish list. We also wanted to assess the building systems, the site, and the infrastructure to make sure that whatever we're doing in there is going to work well. And we wanted to make sure that we're providing a city identity. So obviously trying to use the same vocabulary that was used at this building and across the street to kind of give it that campus feel. So starting with the programming. We reviewed, and there are 7 different city departments and 3 different city divisions that are going to go into this building. To run through these real quick, we have the city manager's office, community neighborhood and housing services, finance, HR, IT, Frank's group, planning and code administration, and then we have the divisions, which are the engineering services, the environmental services, and then a portion of the Parks and Rec facility for cultural events and services division. And how we did this was we started with getting your organizational charts for each of these different divisions and departments. We interviewed each of those departments and talked about what were their wishes, what were their wants, what are their needs, what growth do they anticipate. And then we developed what we call program diagrams. These are essentially what you can see each room, each space that they requested for each staff member. We develop basically a floor plan. Is it walled? Is it just a workstation? Is it an open office, storage, et cetera? And that turns into the actual program that we then sent back to each of the divisions, and they reviewed it and provided the final program. Again, once we had the final program, we reviewed adjacencies, whether it was internally between these different spaces or adjacencies with other divisions and departments within that building and who they wanted to be near. Once we had those program diagrams, that correlates to the schedule that you see here. Each row is one of those spaces that are going to go in here. It starts with the net square footage, so that is a dimension of an inside wall to inside wall. We added a rough grossing factor, and this is before we laid out anything in the building, just kind of getting an idea of what space is going to be required and if this will fit. So that rough grossing factor was 1.5, and then we also provided a cost per square foot. Now, each cost per square foot is not treated the same, so a break room is not going to be the same cost as a storage room. So we identified those, and we're able to come up with a rough price based on the program and the wants and needs from all the different divisions. Once we nailed all that down, it was time to look at the existing building. The existing building is just slightly over 72,000 square feet, but that does not mean that entire square footage is usable space. The 4th floor is currently occupied and will remain occupied once the city has moved their spaces in by the Montgomery Community College. So we can't use the 4th floor currently right now in this phase. The lower level is all storage space. It currently has storage space down there, and there is anticipated to be more remote storage for the divisions and departments that are going into this building. The rest of the floors, we have our center core areas, vertical circulation stairs, elevators, bathrooms, can't use those spaces. And then we also have circulation on the 2nd and 1st floor. So what was remaining was just over 39,000 square feet, which left us with a gap between the program that everybody was asking for and what they wanted to see in the space and what was actually available. We were short about 5,500 square feet. So it was time to do some value engineering and see what we can cut to bring this down to fit properly. There were some redundancies in here. A couple of different departments and divisions asked for a multi-user space, so that could be shared between all the different divisions in the building. That saved a little bit of square footage. Same with conference rooms. Everyone can share those. That brought it down another 1,000 square feet. And then we also looked at print rooms, print areas. Everyone requested their own. That can be shared throughout. So those were reduced down as well. That gave us a rough savings of about 33,000 square footage. In addition, we needed to look at what is actually necessary and what is a wish list. The Parks and Rec does not need to happen in this current phase, so it was talked about taking that group and putting that department up on the 4th floor for if and when the community college moves out in a separate future phase. In the same realm, the IT requested a computer training space. It was almost like a computer training lab. That does not need to happen right now. That could happen in the future. We do have a multi-purpose room that's going in here that could be used for that. So again, that was held off into our future phase as well. That brought our reduction down to just almost hitting exactly what we needed to hit. So then it was time to take those square footages of where we landed and move them into test fits. This is where we take those programmed bubbles that we created and start to see, shuffle them around into the building, how the adjacencies work with each other and how it actually works. We came up with 3 different options, reviewing with our team and the city. Each option included the Parks and Rec and that IT training space going on the 4th floor in a future phase. So that was not included in any of the options. In all of the options, our grossing factor, which during program was 1.5, we were actually able to fit things a little bit tighter, and we got that grossing factor down to 1.3. So we were able to fit the remaining wants and needs that we did not have to cut within this building. We reviewed these 3 options with the city's group and picked the one that they liked, adjusted things they didn't like, and came up with the final layout. So I'm going to walk you through this real quick. Remember to slow me down if I go too fast. All right, so first floor, we have our main entrance here. That comes into a public access corridor. You can see these circles with the crosses through. Those are secured access doors. Right now, we are showing the bare minimum throughout these plans. I'm anticipating more are going to get added down the line, but right now, this is showing how we're controlling the public. You come in into the main lobby waiting area. They have access to the stairs, which provides a second means of egress, which is required by code. They have access to the elevator, and they have access to the restrooms. On this first floor, we have planning and the code administration that has direct access off of that waiting area for their public counter. We have engineering services, which shares the space with planning and code. They work a lot with each other. And then that same realm, we have environmental services right across the hallway. Also on the first floor, we have a portion of the community neighborhood and housing services. The spaces that were on this first floor are the ones that require public access. So we put those portions down here, and the other half is upstairs on the next floor. We have a shared print area with the required plotters that they need, the larger print format for these different divisions down on this first floor. We also have the central mailroom. And then we have shared meeting spaces. Moving up to the second floor. Again, our vertical circulation, our stairs. This second floor is controlled by access control. You would need to card in to get into the second and third floor. So if those public who is coming in for the community college, they can come right in, use the elevator, go straight up to the 4th floor and gain access, but can't get to the second and third. We also have our central shared restrooms. We have the city manager's office. We have the office of the city attorney, HR, that other half of the community neighborhood and housing services, just 1 story up from the ones that are public access below. On this floor, we also have the shared facility break area. It is large, but there are a lot of people within this building. And within that, there is a kitchenette and vending as well. And then we have our multi-purpose room that was requested for multiple uses throughout these different departments. And that is directly off of that kitchenette, so you can do catering or things like that if and when needed. We, of course, have our shared meeting spaces and our shared print area on the second floor. Don't need to traverse a floor to print something. Third floor, again, our vertical circulation, our restrooms, finance, community and public engagement, IT, another large shared meeting area, and our print area. We also have what we call wellness room, but this is actually the lactation room for the building itself. And that is our rough layout. In the basement, they're existing, or here's our vertical circulation, but we do have existing storage space down there that is going to remain. And then we are adding additional storage spaces for those remote needs for the apartments in this space, but also for general building facility maintenance, janitor's closets, things like that. And then we also designed a site diagram. Again, getting you oriented, here is our building, our main entrance. We have 3 drives around us. I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with this building across the street, but there is an alley behind it that is a 2-way drive. What our goal is to bring a connection point from that alley out to South Summit Avenue. However, due to existing conditions, we can only fit a one-way drive. We don't want to start diving into dealing with underground utilities or dealing with the garage closeness. So this will be a one-way drive. It's going to be a right on off of the alley and a right out onto South Summit Avenue. This will provide upfront handicap parking and a 1-hour delivery parking space as well. The existing parallel parking on South Summit Avenue will remain, and that will be signed for a limited amount of time to be determined, whether 30 minutes, an hour, for those coming in to either drop something off or go to the planning department for a quick stop. We are going to provide some actual pedestrian connections, so you're not going to have a dirt path there anymore between the train station and the garage. It will be a nice sidewalk, planning, etc. We will, because we are doing impervious surface, have to do some sort of stormwater management bioretention, so that's expected on that front site pad as well. The loading dumpster area is going to remain where it is, but that will be reconfigured to be more friendly for the dumpster and trash pickup. We are anticipating flagpoles to help identify this as a city building, but also highlight that entrance as well and pull that same vocabulary in with this building. And there is anticipated to be some sort of public art display. So what is the game plan? We've already talked about, we did existing verification, we walked it, we had our mechanical engineers, our structural engineers review the building, and we've come up with game plans. We reviewed programming, test fits, and design layouts. We are currently at 15% of the design progress. What we're doing right now is we are moving forward with the layout. We just received the site surveys last week, so they are able to update that site diagram that I showed you to match the existing conditions. And we are going to, once we have that nailed down, review what's actually going to be required for site approvals moving forward. We are working on the building assemblies analysis and direction. We will be replacing all the windows in the building. Looks like we're going to be replacing the roof on the building. There are currently leaks on the roof happening. And we are doing a life cycle analysis on, I think right now we have 4 different options for the mechanical system. That life cycle analysis is going to be pretty critical. That is going to determine whether we move forward or have to do a new incoming electrical service, or if we can use the one that we currently have. Fingers crossed we can keep it. But once we get through this path, we'll be at 30%. After all that, it's time to get the cost estimate done. We are currently in the process right now of having that evaluated and are expecting one by the 31st, I believe. We're going to move right into what we call the design development phase. That's where we get into real details. What are the finish colors? What is the hardware? What type of doors are we doing? All the special mechanical systems, et cetera. Review with the utility company what we have to do. There are some existing utility poles by the entrance that are going to have to get relocated based on that new right out onto South Summit Avenue. We're going to review our anticipated direction and design with the authorities, code officials, et cetera, make sure we're all on the same page and have no surprises when we get to the end. Once all that's done, we will start to actually develop that into the construction document, which will then become the permit bid set. And that is going to be compiled of both the drawings and the specifications. There is currently a construction manager at risk that has been brought on board by the city, which we personally as a design team believe that is a brilliant idea and the way to go about it. They do assist with the design and value engineering throughout the process, and it makes life a lot easier diving right into construction. They are on board and we'll be coordinating with them throughout the entire design process. And then we'll be hitting our permitting and approvals. That's when we'll hit 100%. So schedule-wise, what does this look like? By the end of fiscal year 25, in the quarter 4, we hope to have all the design decisions and directions completed. Once we have that, we will develop that documentation by the end of quarter 2, fiscal year 26. During both of those phases, we'll be coordinating with the utility companies and the code officials. We'll also be getting permitting. So by the end of quarter 2, FY26, we should have a full permitted construction document set, and it can go out through the CMAR, through their subcontractors to bid it out by the end of quarter 3, FY26. and then construction can start, and we plan on that. That is most likely going to run until Q3 of FY27. And now I hand it over to you guys for any questions you might have.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It's super exciting. And actually, I'm impressed with the timeline. I hope this does come to fruition as planned. It's great. You know, as the one thing it's not going to change, and that this is not any kind of directive or request from the dais here, but I look at the basic overall design and where the front door is. I wish the front door was oriented toward this building so they would sort of be together, but
We all do, yes.
yeah, I'm sure.
Yep.
I'm sure we all do. But this is it. I love the process. I like the way that these plans are shaping up. This is really, really exciting. Questions, comments? Neil Harris.
So I went and took a look at the building a couple of weeks ago, walked around the outside and through the inside. Couple things I noticed. One is that the basement windows along Old Town Avenue are right at ground level. They're like half-size windows. It seemed like potentially a security risk. What are you anticipating doing to make sure that nobody ends up sleeping in our basement?
Yeah. Do you want me to handle that? There are multiple different options that we can do, and this is something that we can review with the team as we go through them. I mean, there's always the bar option of adding bars to it, which is not very aesthetically or welcoming pleasing. There are different types of glazing, security glazing you can do. And then I believe Ron and I were talking about this earlier, that we could potentially do a typical window system with some sort of glass block behind it, because that is the only location that daylight is coming into that basement for the maintenance people that are down there. So something similar to that would create a security aspect as well. And then you also have the police station here looking directly at that, so, yep.
That is true.
Yeah.
They really would have to be pretty brazen to right across the street from the police station.
Living in a brazen world.
There are options, though. They're just things we'd have to review and let the city decide.
Okay, and speaking of daylight, so in buildings that I worked in recently, the layout, what they did was they put the offices with walls and doors on the interior and cubicles around the outside so that everyone got a chance to get some sunshine in their day. Here it looks like the kind of the older way to do it, where the people with the nice offices got the windows and the poor people in the cubicles in the center. What are you thinking about that at this point?
That was something we looked at, because we do like it when you have more of a shared daylighting office setup where the offices are on the inside. We just happen to have so many offices, it didn't fit out that way layout. In addition to that, we are matching the vocabulary of this building and what we've done here. And there are high transoms in every single corridor with the offices on the exterior. So we are bringing that daylight in, doing that exact type of replica where there will be coming through. You'll have side lights at doors, things like that, where that daylight will be able to get through into more of those interior spaces. We've also tried to set it up where at least there's breaks, like a workstation or two in between offices along the exterior of the wall. So there's some daylight. It may not be the whole exterior perimeter, but there is some breaks in there as well. Yes, those are some of the goals that we're trying to hit.
All right, that's great. One last thing. A lot of newer office buildings, work groups have small workspaces, and not like conference rooms, but more like huddle spaces where you can have 3 or 4 people and a whiteboard or something like that to brainstorm. I haven't seen anything like that in the preliminary floor plans. Are you thinking along those lines as well?
There were some divisions and departments that requested that. I believe IT was one of them. They do have a huddle group in there. There were, I think, a few other that had kind of like general tables out in the middle of their space that they wanted to do something like that in. We also have the meeting rooms as well that can be set up and shared where they can use this huddle and have access to those as well.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking along the lines of also interdepartmental ability for different, not just within one department, but groups that could share some information.
And with the meeting rooms, and they're at every single floor, you have at least one. Some have up to 3 or 4 different meeting rooms per floor. But those meeting rooms are not just only for conference rooms. They can use those as huddles, and they can schedule those as needed. And they'll have the capability of being able to move furniture around that works best with how they want to use it.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. There is a whole lot that I like about this.
Good.
Good stuff. One of the things is the structure of the where the departments and divisions sit seems to focus on collective cohabitation so that there's an increase in productivity, I assume. So that productivity works well, it flows well, because people are more co-located than they are today in.
That is really the definition of what laid this out, was
Okay.
trying to get those adjacencies that those different divisions and departments requested. Like, I work with this department every day, all day long. We put them right next to each other, so they were able to do
Okay,
that.
perfect. Yep.
If I could add, we are also, I think, just above the productivity goal is better service to the public, right? And so now you have all of those departments or divisions next to each other so that we can maximize a one-stop shop for the public coming in, or really quick or easy access for those from the public who need to access those services. So that was goal number 1. Co-locating them also increases productivity.
Okay. You just through the design, you feel that flow. So
Good.
great job there.
I'm glad you noticed that.
Also, you a couple of items you said future, like the not public works, the Parks and Rec, and also,
That
the
IT
computer
lab, yep.
potential. Where would it go? Because it looks like you're maxed out here.
It would be the 4th floor. If
Okay.
and when
Okay.
the community college does move out, there's also the option, and Tanisha, you might want to speak to this a little bit more, but the option of the lab being shared with the community college, the computer lab.
They currently have a lab there. I mean, part of our internal discussion about the computer lab, going back to the beginning of the presentation, we asked staff to dream big, dream wide, and they did. They did not disappoint there. But when we have the reality conversations, it's, especially since the pandemic, all of our training has been done remotely because we can sit at our desks and have the training piped in. So I think gone are the days where you march into a computer lab and sit down at a desktop for training. I think they would still like us to maybe bring our laptops to some community room together, which we can do in the multipurpose room.
Okay.
So the lab space, if it happens, would happen on the 4th floor. I'm just not seeing a lot of future use of that because we've already kind of outmoded that approach.
Agreed. And in my other life, we had a big training lab that post-COVID we got rid of. It's now a little kitchenette area, which is nice. And working with the utilities in your schedule, is that a best case or worst case?
That is, we hope it goes this way case.
Okay, all right. I got my fingers crossed on that one.
Yes.
We do know some people that we can call if we have any trouble with utilities.
Yes, we do.
We've dealt with them recently. Some of us have, anyway. Did you have any more, Lisa?
Nope, that's
Okay,
it.
Jamil.
Thank you.
Just 2 questions. How do you think about modularity, expansion, contraction, where you kind of laid this out in a way with the current workforce, but maybe a department grows, another one shrinks. I remember way back in the way going to the Lockheed Martin building in Rockledge Drive, and their walls could be changed. So you could make, extra offices, or you got a promotion, your office got bigger, your neighbors got smaller. I hate to be that neighbor. So how does this design kind of language think about that within the existing space?
So we did talk with each of the departments about their growth, their needs, how they're going to work. We also standardized if you have a manager, their office is this size. If you have a director, their office is this size. If you have a P, whatever, it's this size and that size. So it's standard throughout. When you do go with those modular type of systems that you're talking about, that comes with pros of being able to adjust a lot easier than taking a wall down and moving it, but it also comes with cons. You don't get that sound transmission coefficient that you want when it comes to you can hear what's happening in the room next door. So those are the type of pros and cons that you would have to evaluate. When we move into this next phase, which is that design development phase I was talking about, when we get into these details, that's where we're actually going to talk about what is this wall made out of? Do you need some sort of sound transmission? And that's something that we can talk about with the group is, do they want it to be a little bit more modular, where you do use these modular type walls, or are you, those cons outweigh those pros, and then it's simply just, all right, we need to increase this size and decrease that size, we'll move a wall or two to get that done.
Drywall.
Yep,
yeah.
Yep.
And then we're expanding our office for my day job, and we've looked at and are implementing phone booths. You know, the 2, 4, like loop and those. How does that?
The little huddle rooms or those privacy type
Yeah,
spaces.
so they're kind of like they're drop in. And
Yeah,
I think they
I
come
see them a
singles,
lot.
doubles,
Yep.
quads.
Yep,
You know, and
yep.
to Councilmember Harris's point, that allow you to drop it in and have, and I think they're soundproof.
They are, yes.
HVAC included and all the connectivity.
Yeah, those are really self-sustaining things that you could fit in any large area that's capable of doing that, like down in that lower meeting room if you wanted the public to use it. But if this is more for staff, you have those upper kind of lobby spaces that you could set that up and put them in. As far as those are normally used when you have very wide open office spaces and you don't have the capability of shutting a door to an office or stepping into a conference room real quick to have those more sensitive conversations. All something that can be added if that's what's determined when we get into that next phase.
Thank you.
Rob Wu.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. I've just jotted down some questions. Current City Hall has a parking lot in front of it. A lot of city functions are moving over there. What's the parking plan? What are we thinking about with respect to?
I believe that we were going to try to utilize the parking garage for everybody who would be working at City Hall. Obviously, they could still park at City Hall if they wanted to walk over, or there's some surface parking here at this building.
Okay, and so would that be dedicated parking, and how would that impact public utilization?
I don't think we've gotten to that point yet about possibly.
There's more than enough spaces to accommodate city staff and public.
Okay. Shared print, will it have, great idea, but will it have confidentiality options?
We have shared print now,
Okay.
and it's all badged.
Badge access?
Badge access, yes.
And can I just add one little thing to that? In addition to that, I believe it's HR and finance have their own small private printing spaces in their suites, just because that is so much, that requires a lot more confidentiality.
Not the lawyers?
Yep. Meh.
Not the lawyers.
I use finances for the most part, so.
Urge you to think about it. And so I think for 16 South Summit, we have the flex space upstairs it hasn't been programmed. And I think a lot of the conversations as to utilization of that space occurred before we actually did this. So do we have visibility onto what we're going to be doing with 16 South Summit, as well as the old City Hall, current City Hall, based on the assessments that were done here?
So current City Hall can't answer yet. I think that's still some discussion to have, and we talked about at some point having a public process. It's still my recommendation that it remains city-owned and public property. It's just how we use that. And so that's future discussion. As far as the top floor of this building, also what has happened since the design is the expansion of our police department. That will continue to expand as we continue to pick up more services from county police. So while we thought we were going to repurpose that for training space and all sorts of ideas have floated around,
I suggested a
it
bar.
looks like it's going to become more police.
Okay, so with police, okay. Gym access, so I didn't see any gym on the plans. Would they be coming over to here? Perfect. I like the ideas on the park design. I think that's an underutilized area in a very central location. So I'd urge us to spare no expense to highlighting and accentuating that area in an environmentally friendly way. To Neil's point, I didn't hear about material use. Maybe you're not there yet, but walling that are glass or frosted that actually allow the external light to pass into, even if it's not complete sunlight. Maybe vampires can then have offices on the inside. I've seen that work in offices. Obviously, balancing it with confidentiality requirements for the private offices. I didn't see council offices. And I'm not advocating for designated council space, but we do currently have space nominally designated on the third floor of that building, the old
I thought
city
that was
hall.
going to be here.
You don't have that space
We
any
lost that a
longer.
long time
Yeah,
ago.
that's
You
Frank's
lost
office.
that years ago, before I arrived.
Frank's waving me off. Is there going to be the opportunity somewhere within one of these buildings to have at least flex space where we can have, it would be council member office space, not the Neil Harris office space and Rob Wu office space, but just throwing it out there. I think it would be beneficial.
Tanisha, you look like you didn't want to say anything.
I don't have an answer
Okay.
for you.
Throwing it out to the universe. And finally, and I think I heard a lot about through the means and methods that were described, but could, and I'm not sure if you're the right person, this might be a broader question of, can you just give me the highlights of how we implemented lessons learned on 16th South Summit into how we're actually now proceeding with the proposed construction?
Okay. Thank you for that question. I do think we've covered it, and I think it's worth covering again. This project in the building we currently sit has, if it's not provided anything, it's provided us lots of lessons to go forward with. I think one of the key features that you're seeing, and you heard Jessica give it some additional validation from her perspective, is the CMAR delivery method. So using the CMAR construction method is not a process the city has used before. It is
That being construction manager.
construction
At
manager
risk.
at risk.
Yeah.
Yes. And one of the there are lots of benefits to it. The early benefit that we're going to enjoy is the collaboration between the person the crew that will build the space and those that are designing the space, and having those discussions occur early. Having a guaranteed maximum price we've talked about. There are lots of additional benefits there. You guys feel free to jump in, but that was certainly one of the ways we wanted to look at how do we increase deliverability on time and on budget. And I think the CMAR construction manager at risk method brings us much closer in line with that. Certainly, day-to-day management and oversight. We have an amazing team with the city, with all hands on deck with this project, with Melanie and Ron, overseen by Brian, and I kind of hover above and helicopter the thing all the time. But we also wanted to make sure that we had stronger owners representation on this project than we did on 16 South Summit. So we have our owners rep already on board. We have a full team, and we will get a lot more, I think, value and productivity out of the owners rep agreement that we've put into place for this project. So I think we've tried to cover all the gaps from an oversight perspective, from a project management perspective, from a bidding and quality and all of those other things. We've tried to close that gap with these approaches.
Okay,
So,
I appreciate that.
Is there
And
anything you guys want to add? Or
I think you've hit it.
Okay.
Yeah, at least for me. Yep.
And so you'd mentioned the fact of existing utilities. I know that utility hookup and the burden with the providers utilities was an issue here. Is that alleviated because it's a existing hookup, or is that basically the same thing that we're here and we just have to bake in the fact that?
I'm not sure I understand what's.
There was part of the delay on this project was a Pepco delay. That was just a Pepco delay.
Okay.
Literally. They just didn't come out. Some of it was COVID, but
Yeah.
they never came when they said they were going to come. It cost us $200,000.
I feel your pain.
I understand
Personally.
I know.
Councilmember Hernandez has pathways to resolve that.
But the utility piece that Jessica mentioned earlier, it was specific to the relocation of the poles out in front of the
Okay,
building.
okay.
So, yeah, and I can touch on that a little bit and explain it. It's kind of twofold. We have the relocation of the poles that have to happen in order to get that exit drive off of the drive that we are adding onto South Summit. There's also the potential, the existing mechanical systems are way beyond their life expectancy, so we're completely replacing them. We're doing a life cycle analysis on a couple of different options. Some are gas fed, some are electric. When we get into the electric, it's unclear at this point whether that's going to trigger a new service coming in.
Okay.
So, but there's ways to work around it and design it where we get everything ready to go. And if we're waiting on Pepco, we can try to keep the building functional until they're able to get in there.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I would just say, and they'll have more experience, but when you're building the float into the schedule, anticipate Noah's Ark for utility delivery.
Yep, gotcha.
But it doesn't sound like that, what you just described doesn't necessarily sound like things that would impact the building use itself if it's just external relocation.
The relocation should not.
Okay.
We're going to do our best to avoid having to provide a new service, because that could affect the building function.
Yes,
Because that's going to service the mechanical system and that whole domino effect. But
Councilmember Hernandez
yeah.
knows. And so you mentioned just mechanical system. Is that the rooftop HVACs and things like that?
yeah, replacing all of that, yeah.
Can you think of solar while we're thinking through spacing for solar? I know we
I
looked
don't-
at that once before and we decided to put them in Washington County. but I'd
So
rather-
overall, we are designing to the green construction code.
Yep,
And we have just had our kickoff meeting with that and this group last week. Yeah, last week, and went through the checklist. Solar was not on it at that point, but we're in pretty good shape. I doubt there's going to be room for solar on that roof. I don't know if you've seen aerials of it, but it
I was
is.
just looking at it, yeah.
It is slam packed with ductwork and screening, and then there's the T-Mobile antenna up there. There's a lot of stuff up there. We can always put solars up there, but it's the life cycle analysis. You're not going to have any payback at all for them in this one.
Just planting the seed for that. I mean, the
Yep.
county, it looks like the county and federal are eating our lunch on the installation of solar panels throughout our own city, so any opportunity.
Okay.
Thanks.
Jamil?
Yeah, and just following up, I echo Councilmember Wu's point in terms of council space, but also I mentioned, forgot to mention, this is going to be the new municipal complex, right? Key area of the city. To the extent there are opportunities, solar, vertical geothermal, other more creative ways that we can showcase, I think that's something we should definitely,
We are looking at geothermal.
okay.
That is one of the 4 systems that we're looking at mechanically. I don't want to be Debbie Downer constantly, but we started our calculations on that. It's not looking too promising. We haven't finished, so I don't want to say it's completely off the table, but we need about 150 wells, and they have to be spaced 25 feet apart. We don't have enough room for that, so we're trying to button up our calculations and verify exactly if there's anything load-wise that we can do to try to minimize that and get that in there, but that's something we're looking at. And
Yeah, and to the extent it makes sense, like pervious surfaces instead of impervious for
Yep.
the pavers or other.
the new roof will also be the light-colored roof for the heat island reduction. The windows are going to be proper thermally broken. They're going to have the low E, all that kind of jazz to make sure we're hitting all those points. The new roof itself, we're going to be increasing the insulation to
Yeah.
meet the current code and beyond to make sure that we are hitting that green code requirement. So there's going to be things here and there, and then all the construction materials, waste management aspect, all that kind of stuff will be a part of it. It's those big eye catchers that I know you guys are looking at, like the solar panels, the geothermal, those kind of things, may be a little difficult in this specific building. But even like the bioretention that we have to do anyways, that can have that kind of eye-catching, we did this to help the environment type thing.
I mean, just throw a solar panel on the corner where the public can see it, and then we can just say we've got solar on
Yeah.
the building.
And then you mentioned payback on some of the items, like on the solar. I think you're aware, you should be aware, in terms of the municipalities now can receive the 30% payment from the government that we weren't used to. So that's a nice boost.
Yeah,
to
we
it.
can look at that as part of it, yep.
Okay, we're going to go to Councilmember McNulty. Tech team, if you could bring up Jim, and Jim, go right ahead. Unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, everybody, for the presentation. I want to kind of circle back to something that Councilmember Hernandez brought up. First of all, super impressed with the test fit and being able to show how all the different departments can fit over the existing layout and what it could look like. I wanted to ask about what sort of growth projections we're looking at with our departments. And just the reason I'm bringing it up is, right now, obviously part of the reason we purchased the building was that there just wasn't any room anymore. So what kind of growth are we baking into these test fits just to make sure that, we're not going to find ourselves, in a couple of years go, oh, now we're too crowded here and we've given away the other space that we originally had.
Do you want to take it or you want me to?
You can start.
Okay. So we did review with each department their anticipated growth, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tanisha, but we did make sure that each department had a certain number of, it's either called growth or vacancy in the plans, but a certain number of anticipated expansion in the future in each of those different departments.
I would also say that there are at least 1,000 conference rooms in the building, and they will provide additional opportunity for growth. We have more conference rooms than we need.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I assumed that we were taking care of, or taking care to include that, but I just wanted to make sure that was part of the discussion. And I also just want to kind of amplify the comments about the front door and the positioning of, where it's going to be, not just in relation to, obviously, I share everybody's wishes that we could have it facing towards this building, the 16 South Summit. But, considering that it will be facing towards the Old Town Park Plaza and, really that main corner of Old Town, anything that we can do to improve the visibility of that being the front door to the new City Hall. But then also, thinking about that pedestrian experience from the garage coming over to the front door, as well as somebody who used to take the MARC train and traverse that muddy path. Where you can park and the interaction between the MARC commuters, between the residents of the crossings, just let's be very intentional about how we designate that this is parking for Gaithersburg City Hall, and then making sure that it's very clear how to get from point A to point B.
Agreed and understood completely.
Excellent. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody from the public or on Zoom who would like to speak on either of the two topics we've discussed this evening? There is no members of the public in the room, but we do have at least one person on Zoom. And if you'd like to speak, please use the Zoom raise hand function, and I will call on you. Okay, we do. Tech team, if you could bring up David Mullins, that would be great. David, you know all the rules. Unmute yourself and state your name and address or neighborhood and go right ahead.
Hey, good evening, David Mullins. I live at the Gateway Apartments. I just had a quick comment about the state legislation from the beginning. I was kind of half listening but it sounded like the landlord tenant bill uh, came up that I think has some of the transparency that was modeled some of the provisions that Councilmember Hernandez put out that ended up in Chapter 13. And if so, just wanted to highlight that's nice as a tenant here. Certainly appreciate transparency and anything that Gaithersburg's leading on that the state's doing. That's exciting. So if that's what that was, great. Wanted to highlight that. And then I was just interested by the comment about council like workspace for y'all. It seems like it would be a good message, like to if there was dedicated space for incoming or people interested in running who have the kind of job where they can't use an office that's their day job or don't have a home office. Certainly would open it up to more like of the public. Maybe it could be that message. So in that case, I'd be for it. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you very much, David. And you are correct that the legislation was inspired by the legislation we passed here that was originated by Councilmember Hernandez. And your message on the council office space was heard loud and clear. So thank you very much. And any further questions or comments before we adjourn here? This has been great. This has really been a great discussion. So excited about this project. This is going to be our new city hall, and we are all psyched about it. So, Jessica, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate what you and your team are bringing to us, and look forward to getting to 30% and then 100% and going through this chart as planned. So again, we will not have a work session next week, March 31st. The next regular meeting of the Mayor and Council will be on Monday, April 7th. Until next time, let's do great things, Gaithersburg. We are adjourned.
Recording stopped.